everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are watching Neon Genesis Evangelion, the rebuild 1.11, because that's not confusing at all. And I've noticed we have 1.11, 2.22, 3.33, and then Thrice Upon a Time is 3.0 plus 10. I'm like, I feel like Kingdom Hearts got the biggest influence from Neon Genesis in terms of nomenclature and everything. But this movie came out in 2008, apparently. So probably around the time Kingdom Hearts. Maybe it was all just around the same time and it all merged together in the instrumentality. But so this was technically made nearly 10 years after the very first series aired. So that's interesting, like a 10th anniversary Neon Genesis. I honestly know nothing about the rebuilds. I've been wanting to know nothing about the rebuilds because I've wanted to go into them blind. My guess is that the rebuilds, just the term rebuild, means that it's a reboot in movie form, that it's a reimagining of Neon Genesis. So my curiosity, I don't think they'd remake End of Evangelion necessarily. I don't know about that. But I could see them like trying to like reboot the series, but I've been told, or at least I've heard through comments, that there's several years in between all the rebuilds. So I'm like, is this movie going to be like the first part of Neon Genesis, the anime, redone with like new animation and recontextualized? And then is each of the rebuilds going to be like the 3 parts of it? And then is Thrice Upon a Time going to be a redoing of End of Evangelion? I mean, there's a part of me that's like, that'd be kind of cool to see like an updated modern version of it. But then there's another part of me that's being like, well, what all would you update other than the animation? Like, what would you change story-wise and thematically? Because the anime itself is pretty darn special. So I'm curious to see. I've had very mixed reviews. I have some people that love the rebuilds, some people that are like, I hate the rebuilds. And so I'm coming at this with a very neutral mindset. I don't know what to expect. I imagine it's a reboot, but I don't know what to expect. I am at least excited by the prospect that the animation is probably going to be better. Although 2008, I'm not sure. I know Thrice Upon a Time came out very recently, so I'm sure that animation is beautiful. But, However, I am really excited, though, to kind of go back, if that is the case, and see these characters again, see a 10 years later kind of update with those characters, whatever that looks like, to see Kaji again, maybe, to see Fuyu-chan again, to see maybe Kaoru again. Although, if we're breaking this up in the 3-act structure, then I don't know if this film would have Kaoru in it. It may be until we get to like 3.33 or something before we get to him, which, sad days. But it'll be interesting to see how this all is framed. Getting Neon Genesis in the context for a new audience. That's rather interesting because, yeah, 10 years makes a big difference in your viewership. So trying to get new people engaged. It's also kind of ironic, I guess, because at the end of Evangelion, one of the messages Anno said was that, you know, otaku culture, we need to not perpetuate Neon Genesis's popularity anymore. And here we are trying to perpetuate Neon Genesis's popularity even more. So I'll reserve judgment. But I do have some comments. I do have some comments from End of Evangelion. You all left some amazing comments on that exhaustive slog of a discussion that I did. Ugh. And I honestly have taken a little bit of time off because I just need it, right? But I do have some comments from there. And also I was told to go read the Classifieds article that's from the, of all things, a PS2 game about Neon Genesis Evangelion. Why are we surprised? I did like the end of the article, the classified information. A lot of it, I'm not going to touch base too much on it. It definitely helped explain some things. Some people were like, well, you can't treat it like it's completely canon, but it does help explain if you're curious. There were some things I wanted to note about that. But with that being said, we're going to do some comments before we start this giant movie. It's about as long as End of Evangelion, but we'll talk about that at the end. Alex Cornejo talked about how there is a 10-minute video, and this was shared in the Discord on Patreon, of Anno like going to like a call girl thing and talking to some like women doing phone sex. And the funny thing about the video is that one of the women that he talks to, she eventually like gets on the subject of Neon Genesis Evangelion, of all things. I was like, you know, a series is popular when it permeates to even call girl conversations. And she was talking to Anno about it, not realizing that Anno was the creator. So if you get a chance to go find it on YouTube, it's a pretty good video. But Alex Cornejo was talking about how Neon Genesis Evangelion is basically two ex-lovers and their quarrel and having their children fight it out. So you have Adam and Lilith having a quarrel, their kids, the angels and the humans, fight it out, and then they both end up falling in love with the same boy, Shinji, and decide that everything's going to be okay. So we end up with like not an OTP but like an OT3 between Lilith and Adam and Shinji, except Lilith is represented by Rei, Adam's represented by Kaoru, and then you have Shinji. I'm fine with it. I feel bad Asuka gets left out again, but I'm fine with it. It's great. Matthias talks about that there was an unused track for Asuka's death in End of Evangelion, and then the song Everything You've Ever Dreamed, which I went and looked at the lyrics of that song. Very much about Shinji and Asuka's relationship, about the idea of being in love, the confusion of being in love, the betrayal that can happen with it. It was a very poignant song, and I think it ties in perfectly with Shinji and Asuka's relationship in End of Evangelion. So I'm glad that you pointed that out and suggested it. Bernard Black talked about how Kaoru and Rei, they basically were like Adam and Lilith talking throughout End of Evangelion, which kind of goes along with Alex Cornejo's comment. I really like that. Impulse Strike 00. Thank you. I was making fun of the Magi unit from the United States in End of Evangelion, being like, well, why'd they choose Massachusetts? And then, Impulse Strike was like, well, that's where MIT is. And I was like, oh. Yeah, I felt really dumb after reading that comment. I was like, yeah, that is where MIT is, which, is the technical institute that would make sense where they created the Magi from. So yeah, foot in mouth, but thank you for sharing that. Alexander Q talked about how Yui's soul being connected with the O1 unit and possibly the OO unit, and then Asuka's mother's soul being connected with the O2 unit. So the question is, what the hell is up with Toji? Who was his mom's soul connected to the O3 unit or the O4 unit? What? Is that why he got taken over by the angel because he couldn't fight it? Is that the source? It's very interesting to think about with the souls being connected to these units, why they picked Toji of all people, and what does that say about the Evangelion unit? Because it was imported in from America. So were they just like, part of me thinks that Gendo was like, well, part of the scripts say that the 13th angel is going to come through this Evangelion unit, so we'll just pick Toji. And it also makes me feel worse for Toji because it's like, well, he was just basically sacrificed so that they could have the angel come and fulfill the prophecy and just go on to the next checkpoint. And so I'm like, I kind of feel bad for Toji. Wee bit. I know I'm going to read the manga, so I'm just going to hold off until we get possibly more with that. But that was a really good question to ask, Alexander. I was like, interesting. But also, talking about that, the idea of Gendo being a perfectly failed Shinji. He's basically, if Shinji had the bad ending, Gendo is the result of that. And apparently there was a popular belief that what was said to Ritsuko by Gendo was on the pamphlet that was given out at a Japanese screening of End of Evangelion, which says, I need you or I needed you. And I could totally see Gendo telling Ritsuko that he needed her. It's true and a lie at the same time. On the one hand, he did need her to have everything go according to plan. But on the other hand, he didn't need her in terms of sex because he's been after Yui the whole time. So I could see that being said. It also kind of ties to Maya in End of Evangelion, where on her computer screen it says, I need you. And she's thinking of Ritsuko there. So there's that too. I kind of like that. I think that's really, really cool. But then, yeah, and then at the very end of End of Evangelion, the last time that Gendo talks to Fuyutsuki, he calls him Professor. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Showing that even as Gendo's leaving, he called Fuyu-chan Professor and like drawled back to their first meeting, showing that sign of respect to him. I was like, yeah, Gendo. End of Evangelion gave me a much deeper appreciation of his character, even though he's still like the worst dad. Still world's worst dad, but I appreciate his character even more. Alex Cornejo also talked about how, I actually found this in a Death Note comment someone left on the Death Note discussions I'm doing, but they talked about Japan having a 4-act structure instead of a 3-act structure, and now I'm kind of obsessed. Now I'm kind of like going through all the series I'm watching and being like, in the 4-act structure, how is this different than a 3-act structure? The English teacher nerd in me is like geeking out, right? But in the 4-act structure, Alex says that you can actually separate Neon Genesis, the anime, into the intro arc, the action arc, the descent arc, and the bitter end. And I love that the final arc is just the bitter end. Makes sense. But also noted that episodes 7, 14, and 21 are kind of in between each of those initial arcs and are not actually part of the arc, but like an interlude or a coda. And I'm like, okay, makes a lot of sense. I like viewing the series as that. Checks out pretty well. Because then you have episodes 1 through 6 as the first arc, the intro, episode 7. Then you would have 8 through 13, which would be your action arc, which makes sense. That's where most of the action in the series takes place. Then you have episode 14. Then you have 15 through 20, which would be your descent into madness. And then you'd have episode 21. And then from there, the bitter end arc is a little bit shorter. It's 22 through 25, but it would be your bitter end arc. Makes a lot of sense. And then you could throw End of Evangelion on into that bitter end as well, right? Very cool. And then Bright Girl talked about how Eva Geeks. We talked about in the episode 24 scripts video, the alternate scripts, that a lot of the Eva Geeks, the translation was like very much trying to steer clear of the notion that there was any relationship between Kaoru and Shinji beyond platonic. And Bright Girl made note that Eva Geeks apparently is well known for being slightly homophobic, that they're just like very much quote unquote no homo with all of their agendas of how they interpret the Evangelion dialogue. But I'm like, yeah, you can view Shinji and Kaoru as platonic if you want. That's fine. I'm like, Shinji is our bisexual king. It's totally cool. I think End of Evangelion kind of shows that perfectly. But I also like that Anno in actual interviews has deliberately stated he hired Satsukawa on to do the scripting because Satsukawa was better at writing BL elements. Take that for what you will. So he was better at writing quote unquote homoerotic elements. Take that for what you will. But, good to know. And then as far as the classified info goes, and I know this is a very long intro, the classified info, as far as that goes, most of it was very nice explanation to kind of round out thoughts that we've had in the comments about how the plot works. Again, I'm not taking it as full on canon because it's literally the dialogue from a PS2 game, but it's very thorough. But then some things I did like was that Asuka being described as American, but being a fourth German and a fourth Japanese on her mom's side. Her mom's like half German, half Japanese. Okay, makes sense. I liked that the Eva Geeks classified info talked about, or the Eva Wiki, not Eva Geeks, talked about that the maternal component from Asuka's mom was what ended up in the O2 unit, which would make sense with End of Evangelion and how Asuka views her mother in that moment, but also makes sense because Asuka's mom couldn't recognize Asuka because that maternal element had been stripped away. That all makes sense. Nerves Geofront, several of you commented on this in the End of Evangelion discussion, that the Geofront is basically the black moon containing Lilith. That all makes sense too. And that it was aimed at using originally Lilith to do the instrumentality, not Adam. And then things happened, right? But Gendo's goal in the article was basically to fuse with the O1 unit to reunite Yui with Adam and Lilith and basically become a god. So I'm like, good thing Shinji was there too, I guess. I just like the idea that Gendo was like, I'm going to take over the O1 unit and fuse with Yui and be happily ever after. And yeah, my son's here too, I guess. Just like, even in the article, Gendo is just like totally ignoring his kid. Which is hilarious because Yui was all about her kid. So it's just like that contrast between the two. What can we do, right? And then Seal, the idea of Seal wanting to unite mankind to eventually evolve and ascend into godhood using the Evangelions, right? And basically describing the Evangelions as the body of a god with the throne for a soul, which goes back to that whole Throne of Souls line that was one of the episode titles. I liked that. The S2 engines being described as the fruit of life, which goes back to the angels having the fruit of life, humanity having the fruits of knowledge, merging those together, and the Evas require that from the angels in order to be equal to Adam. The thing about Adam that really got me, though, in this article was the suggestion that during the second impact, when Adam was basically blown up and the Lance of Longinus came out and, I love that the Lance of Longinus in this article is described as such an evil artifact, and it's like, wow, it's just funny that the Lance of Longinus is our MacGuffin for it. But the Kaoru was created because he is the incarnated version of Adam's soul. And I was like, okay, so you have Adam's soul placed in Kaoru, and then you have Lilith's soul placed in Rei. I like that dynamic. And then yes, Lilith's soul was put into Rei, and Rei was cloned from Yui's all makes sense. And then Adam and Lilith. What I like about it is that, yeah, this series confuses Adam and Lilith because in the Adam information section, it says most of the Nerve members think that Adam is the one in the basement. But then we come to find out when we get to Lilith's information that Lilith's the one in the basement. So there's just this confusion, right, of what is what appropriate for the story. And then finally, the Adam and the Lance of Longinus was discovered in the South Pole within the White Moon. The lance is a security device for the seed of life that is to prevent someone from becoming a god. So it's so funny. The Lance of Longinus is actually here to like stop this all from happening. And Gendo's like, we need to get rid of that. So that was really good. I appreciated reading that article. It helped clear up some things. And then your comments have been wonderful. But yeah, now we're going to look at the rebuild. Now, I will go ahead and say this. I am not planning a 6-hour long excursion with the rebuilds per movie. I just don't have it in me. And I feel like End of Evangelion was very special because it was so like, it was the original, the OG movie that like, and the series, they're all like the original material. They deserve all that special recognition. This may still be a long discussion, but I don't anticipate needing a week to go through the rebuilds. I feel like since we're retreading ground, that's going to be slightly helpful. But I am excited to see what it looks like, what all's involved in the plot, what all we get. If there's new trippy elements, we shall see. So, but anyway, let's not waste any more time, shall we? We are going to dive into the Neon Genesis Evangelion Rebuild 1.11. You are not alone, or you are alone. Not is in parentheses. We'll see what that's like here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Huh. Okay, so okay. They had to do it. They just had to reel you in those last 5 minutes, right? And then the end credit scene. Wow. I actually got to watch a post-credit scene. It was fun. So, okay. I have some thoughts. This is not going to be a crazy, insanely long discussion, I don't feel like, because a lot of what they covered in this was covering episodes 1 through 6 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I feel like Alex's comment is very poignant right now. It's very apt, timely. So if we look at Neon Genesis, I've been talking in other series about the 3-act structure, right? And so, because I'm from a Western tradition of English where we have 3-act structures. We have the beginning, middle, and end. But Alex Cornejo was commenting, as we talked about before the reaction, and then as I found out in the Death Note discussion, that Japan's literary structure often takes place in a 4-act structure. And so the idea was that Act 1 is the intro arc, right? And that is taking places with episodes 1 through 6, and then episode 7 is the bridge, right? That's the episode that kind of just like bridges everything. It's not necessarily integral to the story. And then Act 2, we'll put Act 1 here. Act 2 is the action arc, right? And in the action arc, we have taking place episodes 8 through 13, which is when Asuka comes in. It's when we do like Magma Diver. We get a little bit of Asuka's backstory. We introduce Kaji. It's probably, and we do the Dance Dance Revolution. It's the most action-focused arc in Neon Genesis, is that arc. So that makes sense. And then episode 14 is the bridge, right? And episode 14 is the episode with like the weaving a story, where we do like the Ray's poem. We get kind of like the little, it's bridging us from the arc of action that's taking place up to the 13th episode to the more psychological aspects that are going to happen later on in the series, right? And then Act 3 is the descent arc, where we descend into madness, right? Is the descent arc. And that one is taking place with episodes 15 through 20. And then episode 21, which is Gendo and Yui's backstory and Fuyu-chan's backstory, is the bridge there. And then the final act, which would be Act 4, is the bitter end, which I think is the most aptly named. And the bitter end is basically episodes 22 through 26, and I would include End of Evangelion with that. Seems pretty fitting, right? For what we've seen so far with the rebuilds, this pretty much checks off Act 1. Now the preview, though, that's the thing. The preview shows some stuff that gets into Toji's backstory, which is in Act 3. So from what it seems like this story, that the rebuilds, they had to set up your basis, your foundation had to be set up in this movie. You could not alter the foundation necessarily. All they do a little bit. We'll talk about that. They do a little bit. But you couldn't alter the foundation of the series because you need that foundation. You need that initial thing with Masato and Shinji and Rei and Gendo and Ritsuko and Fuyu-chan. You need that essential foundation there for the rest of... You have to build that foundation for the rest of it to fall into place. But it seems like there's things that they've added. Like they've added the whole thing from this arc, from arc 3, with Adam and Lilith. They've added it to there to set up. And then they've added the stuff with Kaoru that's from the 4th act into here. And then it seems like in the next movie, I feel like they're just starting out, like if you had like, you know, it starts out going, it's going rebuild 1.11. It's kind of going, it's starting to branch out a little bit from the actual story. And then I feel like once we get to like branches, like acts like 2.2 and 2.3, it's going to like branch out everywhere, right? I don't know, because there's a girl with glasses at the end that's like the 06 unit. What? But here's the thing. There's a part of me, I'm kind of torn with this movie. I'm honestly torn because there is a part of me that really likes the idea that they're creating something new, like a new reimagining, a retelling of the story and making it different. There's a part of me that likes that because it makes this not seem like a quick cash grab. You know, one of the things I hate the most, I hate the Disney live action remakes. I've watched one of them. I refuse to watch the rest because it's just a cash grab. It's taking something that works, adding nothing truly original to it that's of substance, and then just repackaging it and saying, oh yeah, it's totally different. And it's not really, and it's not good. I don't like them. With this, there are aspects I don't like, and we'll talk about them, but there are aspects I do like, and I'm all for what I would be really disappointed in is if these 4 movies were just beat for beat retellings of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Because if that were the case, I would just go rewatch the animated series or End of Evangelion. I'd just go rewatch it. Why do I need to see... Like, the anime updates are nice. I love the animation updates. It looks gorgeous. Ramiel, one of the best parts of this movie. But again, we'll talk about that. I'll appreciate the animation getting updated. That's nice. But I didn't like Neon Genesis Evangelion because it was the most beautiful animated feature of all time. I like Neon Genesis Evangelion because of the characters, the story, and the message. The animation is great, and I love the stylistic aspect of it, but that's not why I wanted to watch the show. It's not why I ended up enjoying the show. So yeah, the updated animation is nice. It looks very beautiful. And if you wanted to see the opening 6 episodes of Evangelion on screen, on the big screen, then this is perfect, right? But I'll be honest, I would be extremely bored watching this whole series over again if it was just a beat for beat retelling. So, because then it's like, well, we just got through watching Death True, right? So then we've already had 1 recap. I don't want 4 in a row. So the idea of them redoing things and adding new elements and making it different, I'm on board with that. I'm fine with it. If it turns out to suck, then we'll get to like rant watch and talk about it. But I'm actually kind of on board. This new girl, sure, add another one to the Shinji harem. I'm here for it. Why not? Okay, I am on board with that. I like the idea of adding new elements. And I'm very curious to see what in the world the 06 pilot is, because they say that the 04 unit went missing, and then the 05 unit would be, but we didn't have an 03 unit, so... And then obviously, are they making Kaoru into having his own Evangelion? Okay! I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm going to wait. I don't want to know spoilers. I'm going to wait. That's interesting, though. That's interesting, though. I'm like, where does this all... What? Okay. So I'm gonna put down here... We're gonna do two categories here. I feel like that seems appropriate, right? So we're gonna put over here in this one category, we're gonna put elements of praise. Elements of praise with this series, because a lot of it is a retelling, it is a rehashing, and then we're gonna put elements of disdain. Things that I didn't like. I definitely see where the division comes from now. I definitely see the division, because I can see why someone would not like this film at all, and I can see why somebody would really like it. So I'm kind of in a middle ground, I guess. I like it. I like it, but I definitely see parts that I was like, okay, I like that better in the anime than I do on here. So I'm definitely kind of in that neutral middle ground. I'm taking a middle stance because I can. So I'm sure that will frustrate some people. But my honest opinion is I don't have a negative view of it, but I do see elements of it that I was like, oh, okay. I see what you did there. I get where we're coming from. So yeah, let's go through this. Let's go through this. One thing that I do think is a boon, and I know I just talked about how it doesn't matter, but it does matter, is that the animation is beautiful. Is that the animation is gorgeous. And the voice actors are back. I do think it's funny, you can tell, like with Alba, his voice actor, it's been 10 years. Alba's voice does sound a little bit deeper. It's a little bit different. But Masato, Shinji, they all sound the same. I like that. Oh, seeing old Fuyu-chan, and that kind of goes with the animation. I was like, seeing Fuyu-chan look so good, and they made Gendo look older, which I like. They made Gendo look older. He has like some bags under his eyes. The animation was beautiful. I thought that was really good. Might as well, we'll get to it. You all know my favorite part of this whole damn movie. But I do appreciate the animation. I think that is a point that needs to be brought up, is that they did take their time in making this look very beautiful. And it's not a beat for beat retelling. There is some new animation. Seeing things from new perspectives is kind of cool. Like with the simulations, like the simulation where they have Shinji simulating firing the gun, and they show the prototype of the Eva head and like how it all looks. Like, I wondered watching the anime how that looked, and we never saw it because they probably didn't have the time or budget to do it, but we never got to see it. But here we get to actually see what that prototype looks like, and that simulator looks really cool. It's freaky. You got to see like certain shots from different vantage points, like from the simulator, from the machine. They could do some things with CGI that were really cool. They didn't rely overtly on CGI, and if they did, it looked like 2D animation, which was very nice. I was a big fan of that. So yeah, it looks clean. It looks very updated. For being 2008, this holds up really well. Really well. If you told me that this movie was like 16 years old, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd have been like, 16 years old, really? Like, the animation quality holds up very well. For being 2008, I was like, okay, I was all for it. I liked it. And honestly, what they do is they give you the foundation, right? We do get the foundation and necessary elements. Because yeah, they are essentially condensing the first 6 episodes into an hour and 40 minutes, into 2 hours, which granted, that's about the runtime that those 6 episodes would be if they were 22 minutes long, but they add in some new stuff. So, and it's not just a recap. It is definitely a reboot, so to speak, but it's not just a recap of the events. They go through everything pretty well, right? Especially the first episode. The first episode is about 16 minutes. So yeah, they kind of condense some of the like shorter moments, but it's pretty much beat for beat what exactly happened, right? And we get all this. Now, let me go down here. We'll get to this point here and talking about his dad and everything. So there are some interesting elements though. Now I will say this, with the caveat of that they streamline a few things, that is a point of contention that I could see a lot of people kind of being frustrated with, is that there is not a lot of breathing room in this movie. They don't let things linger very long, which it's a movie. You can't do that, right? It's one of the reasons why Attack on Titan, when people were debating whether or not the final 9 chapters, which is literally like 500 pages worth of material, would be animated into a series, a TV series or a movie, I was really hoping for a TV series, because even though the movie may be as long as what those episodes would have been, you don't get breathing room in a movie. There's just not time. Movies function on a totally different level than a television show. And yes, there are movies that have that breathing room, but the plot allots for it. And when you're condensing this much material into a movie and you want to make it flow and be succinct and have like a start, middle, and end, which this movie does have a start, middle, and end. It's pretty clear. It's pretty defined where your acts are within it. Then you just don't have time to linger too much. And there was a lot between episodes 2 and 4 that were cut out because those episodes are a lot of atmospheric, psychological, lingering, just the quiet moments. A lot of that was cut out because there just wasn't time. Right? And we'll talk about that. But so that's something where I could see someone that really likes Neon Genesis for that reason would maybe find problems with. Also, another thing that's kind of streamlined is people get what Shinji's deal is. Like Shinji's relationship with his dad. And I'm gonna put it as both. You know what? No, I'm gonna put that as there's gonna be a caveat here. I'm gonna have like a bridge between these two. On the one hand, they make Shinji's relationship. They make Shinji and Gendo's relationship more transparent. They make it more transparent in here. Like Misato asks, she's like, oh, well, you don't like your dad. You don't get along with your dad, right? You have a lot of struggle with him, which they do that in the anime, but here it's very on the nose. They're like, oh, your dad doesn't like you. Like they almost like look directly at the camera, right? And so I do like that transparency because for the movie's sake, they need to make those relationship structures dynamic and understandable for an audience, especially if they're coming into this series having never watched Evangelion before. They've got to make that known, and they have an hour and 40 minutes to establish a relationship, and it leads up to an arc at the very end, which I'm like, okay. But on the other hand, kind of the downside with that, and I'll draw a little arrow over here, is that the lack of ambiguity, it makes Gendo very villainous. It makes Gendo into an antagonist. It really does. And that's kind of one of the things that now that I see it in this movie, I was like, huh. Because in the actual show, I mean, yeah, from the start, you get that Gendo is not caring of Shinji, does not seem to care about him at all, and is very willing to use him. But it's never forthright and out front enough to where you as the audience are like, well, Gendo's clearly like a vaudeville style villain. No, it's never like that. You question Gendo's morale and his role as a character, but it's very clear that everyone there in NERV respects Gendo. They trust him, they follow through with his orders, and that Gendo has kind of something that he's fighting for. And in this movie, because they make it so pronounced, the relationship between Shinji and Gendo, it almost makes some of the things Gendo says and do kind of seem like the antagonist, and it makes it much more clear cut, which again, it's a movie, they wanted a clear cut. The angel wasn't the only villain in here, right? And it's basically building up to Masato's confrontation with Gendo, which we'll get to. But it's making that confrontation more pronounced and building up to it. So I get narratively why they did that, if their punchline was going to be the confrontation between Masato and Gendo, but it's still rather interesting. I'm just like, it leaves a lot less ambiguity, and I could see some people taking issue with it. So that's fascinating. But yeah, so then we get the Geo front. Again, the animation looks gorgeous. It's great. They did not skimp on Akagi being in the suit. Did not skimp on that. Want to just make note, I'm going to take a picture of Fuyu-chan's sweet, beautiful, sincere face. And the way Fuyu-chan's like, it's their first time seeing each other in 3 years. I was like, I just love it. They made Fuyu-chan look so good. Look at him. I like it. Yeah. And so then another thing too is like just with the animation, the LCL fluid. One thing I do find interesting is that like the LCL, the coolant, the fluid and everything, it looks more watery. It looks much more like liquid, which is more realistic. But I kind of did like the goopy thickness of the LCL fluid and the coolant. It made it more thick and kind of gross, so that when he like has to absorb it all in his lungs, it's like that doesn't seem right. But yeah, so we have that going on. Also something else that I I guess if I'm going to be torn, I'm going to put it in green. I'm going to put it in the middle in green if I'm kind of unsure how I feel about it. And that is going to be them revealing bits of lore from End of Evangelion and later in the series. I'm kind of torn about that aspect of it because they like start out being like, oh, the fruits of knowledge and the fruits of the fruits of love and the fruits of knowledge. I'm like, wait, what? Fruits of life, fruits of knowledge? We didn't find that out to End of Evangelion. You're saying this in the first episode? Wait, what? I was kind of torn about it. Like, I don't hate it, but I was kind of like, I feel like people, because I feel like these rebuild movies are ideally trying to get a new audience established, right? A new audience. They're taking place 10 years after End of Evangelion finished. So it's a new generation of anime viewers. It's a new generation of people just getting into Neon Genesis. And what better way to introduce your audience than a giant big screen movie that basically goes over the first act of the series. Like, I really applaud the series for doing that because it's a bold move. Yeah, it makes sense, right? You want to get a new audience into Neon Genesis? Here you go. But you know what it feels like? It feels like the people that saw this for the first time and didn't go through the whole series, feels like they cheated. It feels like they put in a cheat code. They get to figure all this out within the first 20 minutes of the film. I had to wait hours. I had to wait 26 episodes and an hour and 40 minutes before I figured this out. You guys get to know it the first 10 minutes of the film? What is this? I feel cheated, right? So that's how I feel about it. I don't feel good or bad about it. I'm just like, well, okay. Y'all get a freebie. You get some free passes. Now, I do take issue with the reveal of Lilith, and we'll get to that. I get why the movie does it, and by the end of it, there's going to be a caveat there too, but ooh, I got issues with that. But this part here where they reveal like the fruits of life and fruits of knowledge, I was like, okay, you're going to throw a bone to your audience. I just imagine someone that had seen, that was like a hardcore Neon Genesis fan, was sitting there in the theater going, what, you explain that now? And then the person next to them that's never seen Neon Genesis is like, okay. And you're like, I had to work for that knowledge, you know? It's great. But yeah, it's wonderful. One thing I did not like, and I will have little moments throughout here that I was like, you could have included that, was that there was no build up to the Eva reveal of Unit 01. I was really looking forward to seeing like the hand coming out at Shinji like in nice 2008 graphics, and we did not get that. Instead, we cut straight to, and it almost looks a little too clean. It doesn't look as ominous. It looks too clean and smooth. It doesn't look as ominous as it did in the anime, the first part of that. Didn't quite have that same feeling to it. I'll take a picture of it because that's where I've stopped on. But I was a little bit like, it's okay. Although they do still capture the same feeling of WTF in this moment of Shinji first getting assigned to the Eva unit. They do a great job of capturing that feeling of Shinji's like, why am I what's going on? But they do a part in this of sorting out Shinji's emotions a little bit more than they do in the anime in this, right? And so, but there's a line in here. There's a line in here that Gendo says, because Shinji's like, well, why me? And he's like, well, no one else can do it. And Shinji's like, well, I can't. He's like, I just showed up. I've never seen or heard of this thing. And he's like, I just can't do it. And that line from Gendo, we'll explain it to you. I don't think that was in the anime. I don't think it was in there. And at first I was like, excuse me, you're trying to add like some humanity to Gendo with his son? Like, don't worry, we'll help you. If it was in there, I feel like Masato or Ritsuko said it, not Gendo. So the we'll explain it to you. And that had me for a second thinking, oh, is Gendo going to be different in this version where he's going to be a little bit more helpful towards Shinji? No. 2 seconds later, Gendo's like, he's useless. And I was like, okay, good. We're back to the Gendo that we've had the whole time. I was like, y'all moviegoers don't get it that easy. No. So yeah, it was, and then he becomes a vaudeville villain for the rest of the series, but for the rest of the movie. But yeah, no. But yeah, no, Shinji's hesitance is still maintained throughout this. And he just is like, I can't do it. He's like, it's just not going to work. And then Gendo's like, well, then screw this. We'll go get Rey. He's like, I can't do it. And so, and it is, I would say, though, this is the frustrating part. This is the frustrating part about the rebuilds, is that because everything is condensed and we don't get as much time with Shinji in this, that I feel like they had to add the Lilith scene. Because here's the thing about that is kind of problematic, is that Shinji is somewhat simplified. And I want to explain that because that's not exactly the right... I'm trying to think of a way to say simplified. Everything is condensed. The thing that I love about Shinji in the very first part of this series is that I feel like we spend a lot of time in the first 6 episodes having those quiet moments with Shinji and kind of letting things linger with him. We don't get the shot of the beast. That's the beast eyes. No beast eyes, right? That's one thing I was like, are you kidding me? No beast eyes. It's my favorite part of episode 2. It was the thumbnail. It's my favorite part of the whole episode, and we don't get it in this. Boo. but the whole thing with the eye, with the focus on Shinji, with walking through, we'll get to the whole, like, when he leaves, the hedgehog dilemma, because that was a part I was kind of like, eh. But we don't get that with him in this, and I get frustrated by that because I feel like if you just started watching Neon Genesis, you may not like Shinji based on this movie because everything is so rushed with him. We don't get to spend time like soaking it all in with Shinji. And then that makes it to where I could see people watching this be like, well, why is he being like this? Well, he just said that he was going to do something and now he's not doing it. And the reason why is because they have to rush through the plot so quickly that they don't have time to really focus on it. And so that's like, I could see that being a point of contention where because we don't spend the time with Shinji going through the motions of his psychological state and everything else, because we rush it, it seems like he flip-flops so quickly when the reality is no. And over the course of the series, it really was stretched out amongst a large period of time, and it made more sense in the terms and context of a TV series than it does a movie. So I get that. I get why some people might not like Shinji because of that. Here, it's like I've already seen the series, so I know that that's not really the case. So yeah, at first I was questioning why Rey was in this beat up state, but then we find out later it was because of the Eva plugs. I forgot that. Gendo's creepy look at Shinji and Rey bonding. I was like, that's like, she's a clone of your wife. Gross. Get out of here. But yeah, Gendo's creepiness. I don't know how to feel about it. He's got a few looks in here that are a little creepier than usual. They really are amping up Gendo being a bad parent, and thus I prefer the ambiguity of the anime more, but it's just like Rey suffers, and then we have Gendo like smiling about it, like just, it's very strange. Yeah, like Gendo's like so pleased as punch when Rey's like falling off of the stretcher and is like lying there, in pain, and he's just sitting there like smirking. I was like, that's such a weird animation. It's so creepy and strange. I don't understand. But Shinji decides to pilot the Eva after that. And then basically everything leading up in this first part is pretty beat for beat with episodes 1. And of course we cut from episode 1 to the end of episode 2 when we find out the resulting end of the battle with the fourth angel. Now I do love throughout this movie, one thing I love about throughout this movie is that there are many rainbows. It's like rainbows galore, bitches. Rainbows everywhere. I feel like the Buzz Lightyear meme where he's like, rainbows everywhere, because it's like the coming of Kaoru. Our gay space Jesus is upon us. And here he comes. I just felt like that the entire time. It was wonderful. I love that, just the rainbows of the angels every time they're like destroyed. It's great. Again, not happy we don't see the beast eyes, but whatever. We also get the train elements from episode 16 really early on in this. Like Shinji's whole thing. I do love the rain, like the blood coming down from the angel, like raining upon Shinji. And it kind of mirrors how Toji and the angel like sways as it comes near him in episode 18. I do like that. And the animation from the look on everyone's faces in this moment is exactly the same as it is in episode 18 with Toji and Shinji killing Toji. So I thought that was fascinating. So I like that the animation choices between episodes 2 to episodes 18 paralleling was really cool. I liked that a lot. Again, getting some elements from Act 3 up here. So we're maybe not following the act structure entirely, right? And then the Eva's true form. We'll see. And so then we have the idea, we see like the halo of light and everything. And then they talk about, we get stuff from episode 21 in this part right here, where they talk about Yui deciding on a name and saying if it's a boy, Shinji, if it's a girl, Rei, which is fascinating because then we have this Shinji, Rei, and then we have Shinji, Ayanami, and then we have Rei, Ikari. So from the start there, we have the idea of Rei and Shinji being connected, right? Almost as if, and we see the empty train. So I do like that we have the empty train and the connection of Rei to Shinji. It's still kind of ambiguous and vague, but it is establishing that there is a connection between those two characters that we, the audience, aren't supposed to know yet. So I'm kind of trying to approach this from the standpoint of a new person. And then, yeah, getting the creepy Rei thing, waking him up. Yep. And he wakes up in the hospital, does all that business. Then we cut to the monoliths. We cut to Seal in the monoliths, which is great. They have they're all updated. They have this okay. I'm a little disappointed with Lilith's mask. What the fudge? No. Let's talk about Lilith's mask. Lilith's mask just looks like an angry little, like an angry little pointed thing. It doesn't look like, that's a terrible drawing of it, but it's just like a mask. It's not anything special, right? I was like, you had Seal have this cool logo. I guess they didn't want to reveal in the movie that the mask was tied to Seal because they give it away on the monoliths. But I was like, then don't give it away on the monoliths. Lilith's thing is iconically having the mask that falls off, and you're going to change it into something that looks like the fourth angel? No. So, but I do want to make note of the item. So you have the apple. And then you have this really badass snake around it, which I like. I like the idea that you have a snake around the mask. That's pretty cool. A snake around the apple. That's cool. And then you have the triangular mask there. And you have the 3 eyes and the 4 eyes. So I like Seal's design of their mask. I think that's pretty cool. But wasn't on Lilith. Sad days. Sad days indeed. And so they're talking about the plan and everything, except for the colossal expense necessary to repair Unit 1. Gendo's like, I'm just doing this out of spite. And so them saying the recovery is complete. Okay, from Unit 1. And shows like Masato doing this. And so as long as we can fight the 5th angel, minor bugs are tolerable. And they have this word in German. It says, Ubern Sternzelt, Richik Gott, wir Gürter. I am assuming those of you that know German will be able to translate that in the comments down below and tell me what in the world that means. Because I do not know German. But again, a little tie is there. And so then Gendo's like, no need for concern. And on the back of there is this weird sort of checkerboard pattern. There's like a pyramid with 3 symbols in the corner. There's an eye in the middle. And then there's like 3 chessboards on either side of it. Very curious. I'm wondering if they're going to tie back to that imagery later on. And so they say Unit 2 and its pilot in Germany are under deployment for qualification exams. So Asuka's getting ready to join the film. The construction of 03 is progressing as planned, which is the one that ends up being taken, right? It's the responsibility to make proper use of Nerve and the Evas. We hope you won't disappoint us. Defeating the angels is one step in fulfilling our contract with Lilith. So yeah, I just go ahead and tell us about Lilith. Go ahead and tell us about Seal, about defeating the angels and it being a contract. So they talk about this contract with Lilith, which I'm assuming is tied to the instrumentality, right? But they just go ahead and tell us. I'm like, we had to work for that knowledge. And you're just going to give it away? Yeah, the 27th interim report of the Human Instrumentality Project. its execution is our ultimate goal. Everything will go according to Seal's scenario, except it doesn't. And then we have tied to Shinji in the hospital. Okay, and seeing Rei and tying to that. And then a lot of this is from Shinji like going to Masato's home and getting that again. Then her like stopping off, showing him the city. It's all great. Then moving in, him seeing Pin Pin. Like, it's all very much reminiscent of episode 2, right? But here's the thing about that, too, is that we cut straight from, so we don't get the beast eyes, which is sad. But one thing that I was kind of like, about is that we do not, there is not the development. There's not the development with Toji and Ida. The main reason is they just don't have time. They just don't have time in this to get through all 6 episodes in the first intro arc and be able to develop it. But it's kind of to this movie's detriment, because if you were watching this for the first time and you didn't know Toji or Ida at all, the very first encounter that you have in this film with them is of Toji punching Shinji. Now, granted, that's one of the more known moments, but I feel like the anime does such a good job of building up like those opening scenes with Toji and Ida, like meeting Shinji and being like, oh, hey, you're the new guy and you're the pilot and everybody likes you because you're the pilot. We'll tie back to that. But them saying, oh, everybody likes you because you're the pilot. They know all about you. And his sister was injured in the event. And it kind of builds up that dynamic and it builds up that tension. And then it kind of explodes here when they're outside. But here we start out with it, right? And so if you didn't know Toji, like for me, seeing Toji on screen, I'm like, oh, there's Toji and Ida, yeah. But if you didn't know Toji and Ida going into this, you'd be like, well, who the hell's this guy? And why is he punching Shinji? Because his first words out of his mouth are, sorry, transfer kid, I had to hit you. If you didn't know who Toji was, you'd be like, well, who the hell's this guy? He's an asshole. You just wouldn't know, right? And so it kind of sours or changes your first impression of him, because this is the first encounter we have in here. Same with Ida. He's like, oh, I'm real sorry. That guy's little sister was injured in the big incident the other day. And he's just like, you know, he's like, so that's just how it is with him. Like, if you hadn't watched the anime series to know how Toji and Ida's personalities were fleshed out, you might have a bad impression of them from this moment. Because Shinji's just like, it's not like I piloted it because I wanted to. I do love that they had him like walking back really fast. Like, that part was great. I do love that. And then showing him. I do love that quite a bit. It was great to see Toji again. And then Rei watches him get punched a second time. He's like, why do I have to get hit just because I piloted the Eva? So we kind of streamline a little bit Shinji's like thought process in the film, just a wee bit. We streamline it just to the point where he's asking these questions. I do like the simulation. I do want to talk about the simulation. I do like the simulation a lot. It's like the only CGI we get in here, but it makes sense. But I do like the simulation of showing the Eva head. That part was nice. I liked it quite a bit. But then, yeah, we get Shinji and Nerve and him like going through the motions. And so I do like the idea that they kind of just talk about the hedgehog dilemma, that it's all about that growing up is, you know, finding relationships, breaking relationships, reforging them over and over again, and discovering the way to avoid wounding one another. Like, I like that they kind of simplify the hedgehog dilemma and make it pretty clear cut in here. Now, I could see how somebody, if you like the ambiguity of Neon Genesis and you like those concepts just being put out there without being overly explained, I could see why you wouldn't like that dialogue. But for me, I already kind of have my ideas about how I feel about the hedgehog dilemma in the series. So having them explain it clear cut like this, I'm like, oh, that's neat. That's interesting. But yeah, and Shinji just looking at her. I do like the extra scenes that they add. The Misato and Ritsuko like added scenes. I like those. I like showing them in the airlift and them at the bar together. I think maybe they made it a bar instead of like back at Nerve with the coffee in the one scene, but the airlift scene's fun. And I love that they talk about the budget and everything. Like, they just talk about something random. It's kind of fun. It's great. But then, yeah, the fifth angel shows up. The fifth angel they made look a lot more ominous than it looks in the actual anime. They like with this creepy skeletal like bug body underneath it. It's very creepy. But then yeah, so and then Masato saying that some people just want to use some ammo and they're not happy unless they just shoot something, which is a little on the nose. But yeah, so they talk about, we see Toji and Ida like going outside. But here's the thing, and we see Hikari briefly in this movie. We see the class rep every now and then. But the thing about Toji and Ida is because we don't have that development with them, it's not established that their characters, it's almost like you don't quite care as much for them unless you already knew who they were. And so then for Shinji, him like seeing Toji and Ida, yeah, he knows those guys, but it kind of makes the point where he saves them a little bit like, well, all we've seen is them beating him up, so why would he care to save them? But here he clearly is conflicted, so it takes a little bit away from that because we didn't have time to really get to know these two characters before they were thrown into it. I am glad with the animation, though, on Shinji's breakdown. So Shinji's breakdown. I do like the animation on that. That part was pretty freaky. I do like the animation on Shinji's breakdown, like where he attacks the angel again and doesn't run away. And also the way that they made the hands look like it's flesh toned. In the anime, it was like more of like a maroon color, but here it's flesh toned. It's much creepier seeing the human hands. Again, if you didn't know anything about Neon Genesis, you'd be like, wait, what? And then him with the prog knife. And I was really afraid, since this movie does not give you a lot of breathing room, I was really afraid that they were not going to show us like post him destroying the fifth angel, him like breathing in and out and like having this breakdown. But they do. They actually show it to us. And I was great. They kept the same imagery from the episode in. I liked that a lot. And then we get to see Toji like have the reaction with him at the end, which is really, really good. Yep, I like that. And then of course more rainbows! More rainbows! It's wonderful. Why not? So yeah, then we go through the Hedgehog's Dilemma, episode 4, which has, I think, the most cut out of it, which is to its detriment, I feel, and they try to substitute with other things. So, but we get Shinji and Masato having the argument about him ignoring her orders and just kind of just doing what they say, right? And then her like holding up in the locker room. In this, it's a locker room. And she's kind of holding up. And that like smirk he has in the actual series. But in here, it's much more sinister. Where he's just like, I'm just doing what you say. Like, whatever. Like, he's just done. And Masato's like, it's literally Shinji going into Gendo mode where he's given up. And it's almost the bad ending Shinji. But that look, the way they animated it was great. And she's just like, and you see Masato's like face go, ugh. Like she's just disgusted by it. And she tells him to go get some rest. And I do like that lingering shot of her and the cup that's been spilled. And when he leaves, I like the idea that Masato, she smacks herself in the face like, what are you doing? But the thing about it is, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this in a neutral category because I don't really have an opinion about it one way or the other. But there is very distinct product placement in this movie. I commented on a few times during the reaction because I took some marketing classes in college, and it's one of those things where once you start to identify marketing and identify, like, I'm a salesman's nightmare. I am the least amount. You are the least likely to convince me to buy anything. I am a salesman's nightmare. I love things. I'm like, oh, that looks great. I want it. But when it comes to actually buying it, I'm very selective. And so, like, when I go get a car or something, a salesman hates me because they're like, well, all this. And I'm like, I took marketing classes, I know. I get very pretentious about it. And I'm not afraid to say that. But once you take, like, a marketing class and you start to understand how advertising and branding works, it's ingrained into your brain. So, like, there was the Frito-Lays and the Pizza Hut ads all throughout this. And I kept, like, zoning in on it. Like, it just instantly connected to my mind. I find it endearing in movies, especially when it's not outright. It was only outright in the one, like in the grocery store it made sense, but in the one meeting room where they were having like the military negotiations, the coffee I get, they're trying to stay caffeinated. They're trying to stay awake. They've got to stay up till midnight to plan this. So coffee in the meeting rooms and like Red Bulls everywhere. That makes sense. But the Pizza Hut box, I was like, this is like a do or die end of the world military meeting where we could be facing the end of humanity. Coffee makes sense. Pizza Hut pizza does not. I was like, Masa's gotta get some deep dish. I mean, those carbs are they're gonna kind of balance out with the coffee, right? I kind of found it endearing. I did not dislike or like it. I do like how, as Shinji is shown on the train, like there was little animation decisions that were really cute. Like the animation of the water like slowly drying up as people have left the train, showing the passage of time. Not only the people disappearing, but the water evaporating. That part was really cool. I liked that. But here's something I did not like. Okay? Shinji, I liked it at first. The concept of Shinji walking through the town with like the neon lights everywhere. It felt very Blade Runner, and it was the neon lights and him listening to the music and being like disassociated from everyone. I liked that. I liked the city disassociation scene. Because yeah, it's one of those big conundrums. Shinji wants to connect to someone and feel affection, and he's walking in a city full of people that could all help contribute to that, but he has his headphones in tuning them out. So it's kind of counterintuitive, right? So I liked that, and I was so ready for the movie theater scene. And then we cut to Masato in bed, looking up like at the ceiling, waiting on him. And she's like, oh, he doesn't plan on coming home. Baka. But then we cut to the movie theater. And they say like the Lemon Club, right? Which I'm assuming is, probably a strip club. But we cut to that and the black cat walking across. But then it's just Shinji sleeping like in a cardboard box, like a homeless person. No! I didn't need that explained. So so we had Hobo Shinji and no movie scene. Because the movie theater scene is pretty much integral to the entire Hedgehog Dilemma episode. It's so important because that movie scene like shows Shinji getting so frustrated watching people connect and be intimate, and he doesn't have that for himself, that he gets so frustrated by it. It's like, well, but I didn't need to trade that amazing metaphorical scene for him in a cardboard box. And honestly, the scene where he's like in the mountains with the mist, it is a beautiful scene, but the movie does not quite capture how beautiful it looks in the anime. That was the one point where the animation, I was like, animation doesn't cut it. The animation of episode 4, that thumbnail, it is the most beautiful picture of Shinji we have in the whole series. I will argue it. And the movie doesn't quite do it justice. And we also did not get the Ida scene with Ida and Shinji like connecting about the military thing, which again, it's a movie, we only have so much time, but that scene I felt was really integral to Shinji being connected with Ida and Toji, and we'll talk about that a little later when we get to the climax of the movie. But that scene helped him connect to him, and here we don't get it because we don't have time, right? It's a little sad. But yeah, so we cut back to Shinji, cut back to Rei. I think it's interesting that he gets to the point, this part was curious too, he gets to the point where he can't go any further in the road. He walks along the end of the road until he can't go anywhere further, right? He just walks until there's the part where the road is completely destroyed and he can't go anywhere. I do like that shot of Shinji though and how he looks there. It's a pretty shot. But yeah, prohibited for civilians and it's all cut off, right? He can't go any further. And so at this point, something that was kind of weird was that he's like, and I kept waiting for him to like do the hand clench thing. It shows his hand there, but he doesn't clench it. He just clenches them all at once. He goes, I've had enough of this. And then he just like does this instead of just doing that. He says, I've had enough of this. He's like, take me back to Masato. So, Shinji goes back to Masato with Nerve. This part was really weird. It felt like Labyrinth. It was like Sarah was calling the Goblin King and the goblins to come get him. He was just like, take me back to Masato-san. And then he turns around And there's Nerve. They've all been following him this entire time. Like, what? That part didn't quite... That was a weird move, because here's the thing. In episode 4, the thing I didn't like about it is that in episode 4, Shinji, he goes back on his own volition. He's getting ready. He goes back, and then he decides he's going to leave. And then he decides he's going to leave. And at the last minute, he thinks about the relationships he's had with Ida, Toji, and Masato. And he decides, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay. And he chooses not to run away and stay, right? Which is kind of what happens here. But I feel like it's like Shinji didn't have a choice. He got to that brick wall, and it almost forces him to say, I've had enough of it, right? Where in episode 4, he very well could have left. And it's like the men from Nerve are getting ready to help him leave. But Shinji decides to go back. Here it's almost like he hit a wall, and he was so frustrated by hitting another dead end, he decided, well, since I can't go any further, I guess I'll go back. I've had enough of this. So it changes the meaning of that scene ever so slightly, and I'm not sure I'm on board with it. And also, the fact that Nerve's been following him this whole time and letting him go on a walkabout, it's just a strange decision. It's beautifully animated, but it's just a strange narrative decision. I don't know how I feel about it. And then that's when Masato, comes up to him, and he says that he doesn't have any freedom. And he's like, I can't do this, but I bet everybody else does too. And so Shinji has his motivations and dialogue here are a little bit more streamlined than they are in the anime. And she's like, well, you have all the freedom you want. You can leave if you want to. So they kind of almost reorganize this. And then so they kind of reorganize it. And as much as I love Fuyu with that crossword puzzle. But he says there, what does he say here? I almost skipped it. But yeah, Masato says, you have all the freedom in the world. You can do as you please. And it's like, and that's the conundrum for Shinji, is that he technically does have freedom to do whatever he wants to. But then we're gonna talk about that. The freedom versus fate. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Because it almost seems like, we're gonna talk about that with Masato. When Shinji calls her a hypocrite, I'm kind of like, well, a little bit in this movie, yes. And the idea of the hypocrite. Because, yeah, she tells him in this part here that he has all the freedom he wants. He can leave if he wants to. No one's going to stop him. But I'm like, yes, he could have left. But if he leaves, and Shinji's facial expressions kind of reflect this, if he does leave, then everyone's doomed. So where does that leave him? And we're going to talk about that freedom versus fate. But then we cut over to Fuyu-chan with the cool crossword puzzle as they're playing shogi. He says, your son's actions followed the plan to the letter. I don't know how I feel about that, because it's almost like saying that Shinji leaving was quote unquote according to plan. Let's go try that fate versus freedom thing. And then from there, it's like Gendo, he was like, yes, and now we have to have Shinji meet Rei. We must go on to phase B. He's like, next we must make him and Rei get closer. I'm like, it's so bizarre, because here, when they have a formulaic plan and they come out with it, it's almost like they feel like vaudeville villains. I'm like, what is going on? It's so bizarre. They just feel villainous. And I'm like, it's all orchestrated, which granted, the anime kind of makes it feel orchestrated, but it's much more ambiguous. They don't just come out and say, yes, phase 2 of our plan is to get Rei and Shinji to go on a date. They don't just come out and say it like they do in here. It's all according to plan. It's very weird. And they connect Seal in the scenario. These poor children's fates have already been determined, is what Fuyu says. So their fates are determined. Which, again, we'll tie to that freedom versus fate thing. We'll tie to that again, because I feel like them coming out and saying that is sort of detrimental and against a lot of the core morals of the story, but I don't know. We'll talk about it. I feel like them saying that they were predestined to have this happen to them. It's like, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it when we get to the one scene. I do love, again, why do they give Fuyu, half the budget went to making Fuyu, this movie, it knew what I wanted. As as problematic as there are going to be elements over here, this movie knew exactly what Romania Black wanted. They're like, we're going to pour our budget into making Fuyu-chan look beautiful and into making Kaoru appear and be naked. And also, Ramiel is going to be the best part about the entire film. And I was like, sold! And so they knew how to butter me up. Don't you find it a bit too harsh? You're not alone. Mm-hmm. Which, again, that's a fitting title for Act 1, You Are Not Alone. Which is, or You Are Alone, You Are Not Alone, however you want to view it. But yeah, so then we have Shinji. We have Shinji and the whole thing with Toji. Toji makes him hit him. And then suddenly they're best friends. Again, we don't get that development to see in the classroom. We're not really in the classroom at all in this movie. So we don't get to see those pivotal scenes of these characters becoming friends again through the classroom settings because we don't have time for it. We just have to skim through it, right? So we cut straight to Shinji hitting him back, and then it's like, okay, now we're on a blank slate. We're friends now. And Ray's just watching him like, what the heck? And then we cut to them seeing Ray. And then I do love the idea that they're trying to like free the OO unit, and the giant cross on the OO unit as it's frozen. It's so cheesy, but I love it. I'm like, okay, embrace that religious imagery. Let's do it. And then we do the whole thing about it going berserk, and then Gendo going down and saving Ray, right? Now, granted, what I do like about this scene quite a bit is that we do get to see Gendo going in to save her, and we get to see Ritsuko's reaction. I do really like the connection to Ritsuko in this. The connection between Ritsuko, Gendo, and Ray. I do really like that in this because I have a feeling if we're going to touch base on it later, that it's going to help establish Ritsuko's, like, her being interested in Gendo. Because it kind of functions in two ways there. You have Ritsuko looking down and seeing Gendo rescuing Ray. And so you can see Ritsuko concerned about Gendo. But then you can also see where her jealousness of Ray comes in, much like her mom's jealousness towards Ray. So I do like that quite a bit. I like that we established that. That's a good thing. But yeah. And then Gendo going in to rescue her. It's really well animated. And he asks if she's all right and everything. And it's a nice parallel to him and Shinji, both looking after Ray. And I'm saying that's good. And then we see like the heat from everything cracking and bending the glasses. Gotcha. It's great. So anyway, going back, and then we see Shinji looking at Ray and Gendo and wondering what's up. I like that we get the two of them, Masato and Ritsuko, in the bar. That's really good. Let's see if I can get a close-up of them. Again, I like that a lot. And her questioning, like Masato getting used to it. And so they kind of go over, they connect a lot of things with Masato and Shinji in this scene with Ritsuko and her in the bar. So the Masato and Shinji relationship is expanded on. It's a bit more on the nose, where Ritsuko kind of like goes over Masato's connection with Shinji and how they feel about their father. But again, we don't have time for an anime series to go through all these in more detail, which is, with this part here, I'm not for or against it. I get why they do it a certain way. I like that they at least change it up a little bit and it puts Ritsuko and Masato in a different environment. I do like that. And I do like that Masato actually questions, why is Gendo so distant with his own son? We're going to tie that to later. The later part I don't like, but this part here, I'm like, well, and I say I don't like it. I'm torn. But yeah, Masato questioning Gendo. I feel like it happens in the anime, but here it's very much more pronounced. And I do like that she calls it out. And Ritsuko doesn't really have much of an answer. Ritsuko's just kind of like, and it looks like he talks to Ray a lot. It's a terrible balance. And all Ritsuko says is that men have no interest in anything other than themselves, which is kind of a nice tie-in to the fact that everything Gendo is doing is for himself. Like, he's only nice to Ray to use her. It's almost like Ritsuko's giving Masato her answer without giving her the answer. She's saying it in a very roundabout way. But no, I like this scene a lot. It's really good. And then Ritsuko says she has to leave. Yep. So anyway, and Shinji's like, why was my father smiling at her? Then we get the scene where Shinji goes and visits her apartment. It looks pretty much the same. I'm glad that they kept like the creepy elements, the bloody bandages, everything. I feel like her towel is bigger, but I also feel like her boobs are bigger. Ray is like a B cup and you guys made her like a double C or whatever. I'm like, no, okay, whatever. I'm not going to complain. But it is kind of weird. I do like that Shinji kept the glasses on for a big part of this scene. And then he took them off and was looking away from her. Yeah. But yeah, that towel had to be bigger. Had to cover more ground. So yeah. And then from there we go to the scene where she slaps Shinji. We cut basically through that. And then you know what? You know what? The best part about this movie, the biggest boon, is my girl Ramiel. We gave all the budget to Ramiel. I freaking love Ramiel in this. It's amazing. She looks great. I no wonder she has become best girl, right? She's beautiful, like the prism, how like translucent it is, but the fact that it like changes its shape and appearance when it fires its missile. Oh, my heart. My heart. And the drill is part of the pyramid itself. Mm-hmm. And they show the inside of it where it has like the spear inside of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ramiel is best girl, best part of this damn movie. Is this stupid pyramid that's blue. Will I dress up as Ramiel for Halloween for the Neon Genesis for Rebuild 2.22? Or maybe. Or that or the Girlfriend of Steel? Maybe. We'll see. Might be dressing up as it. Mm-hmm. I do love the animation, though, of her firing the laser and how it melts through everything and gets to Shinji. The animation is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. The animation is stunning. It's so beautiful in this. And it's great. Ramiel, best girl. I'm going to find a nice picture of Ramiel. Get a good shot of her. But yeah, they do show the image of them on the train. And Shinji and Rei going to the same place but being separated. Mm-hmm. Firing the laser. It's just wonderful. It's so good. And seeing her. Ramiel's just so amazing in this. It's great. But yeah, the animation on Shinji getting attacked, it's really, really good. And then forcing eject. And then, so yeah. And then Gendo being like, tell Shinji to stay in there. And Masato's like, but why? Your son is literally dying. So it's all right. We can like kickstart his heart. It'll be okay. And they managed to get him out of there. Oh my God. To retrieve in the unit. And they're like, begin the cardiac massage. He's dying. Oh my gosh. Like, he just looks so sad. Like, I hate how, like, Shinji, they make him look as he's dying, like, in such pain. Mm-mm. And then injecting the plug. And then they put him, like, they put him basically into, like, a iron lung that has the nerve symbol on it. Like, Nerve's gotten to the point where they have their own iron lungs. You can get Neon Genesis merchandise for anything. Why not? I am going to share that in Discord, the Nerve iron lung that we have. Which is curious, because if you actually compare it, you have Shinji in the iron lung here, and then Kaoru, like, comes out of this coffin at the end of the movie. We'll get to Kaoru. We will get to Kaoru. I am so freaking excited about Kaoru. But yeah, the drill and everything, love it. They just make Best Girl look so good. Again, the product placement, though, the product placement with the pizza box. I'm going to take a picture of that. It's just one of those things, like, would y'all have pizza during an end of the world meeting? And would it be Pizza Hut? If I was doing an end of the world meeting, I'd be like, I want the best thing we got in town. If we're going to have to do some end of the world. Stuffed crust ain't cutting it. So, yeah. To be fair, what I do like about this episode is that they do still take the amount of time that is needed to build up the laser being fired. Because that was one of the best things about episodes 5 and 6, was that the entire episode 6 was them building up the laser and the 1 minute of battle between Ramiel and Shinji and Rei. That was like the best thing about the episode. Now, they expand it to make a climax in this movie, because essentially the battle with Ramiel is the climax, and that's what they have to build up towards, and it gets a bit cinematic, and we'll talk about that, but I do appreciate that for the most part, they kept to the build-up. They kept to the build-up of episode 6. Like, they kept to all those different divisions doing their function. Like, I do appreciate that. That part was nice. I appreciate it. It's great. So then, yeah. Now that all that's left is the pilot. And so here they talk about the dummy plugs and say that they're not ready yet. And so Fuyu-chan says, do we brainwash him? What? Brainwash him? What the hell? Why are we brainwashing Shinji? Why was that even on the table? When was that on the table? When has that been on the table? I'm sorry, what? Fuyu-chan, why would you say that? And then Gendo's like in his like big dick energy pose, like right here in the chair. And he's like, if things don't work out, there's always Rei. Like, it just, of course there is. And they're like, isn't that risky? And he's like, well, if the pilot's useless, then I guess we'll have to do it. But then he says there are 8 angels. We still have 8 angels we must defeat. So at this point, they had defeated, and I'll just put it up here. They had defeated 5 angels. There were 8 left, which would be 13, right? And that includes Ramiel. And then you have the bacteria one. And then you have Kaoru. And then you have Toji, I guess. 14, 15, 16. The numbers were weird there. I was like, 8 angels left. I was like, don't we have more than that? Because we haven't even gotten to like the bacterial one, or we haven't gotten to Toji and the Kaoru. That number threw me off. I was like, 8 angels, and maybe I'm an English major. I'm not a math major, so I'm sure somebody in the comments will be like, no, here's how there's 8 angels left. And I'll be like, okay. You all are keeping me 100. But yeah. And then Fuyo, then we must realize our goal. Again, the scenes with Fuyu and Gendo and all of this, they seem like such vaudeville villains. And in the actual anime series, it's not that obvious, because there's not really an obvious villain in the series. It's more about Shinji's struggle with his own mental state. And there are angels that are antagonistic, but they aren't really, it's much more ambiguous, right? We do get the train scene here. I'm curious. It's curious. We get the train scene with Ramiel, the train scene from episode 16 up here with Ramiel. So I'm curious when we get to like the marble angel, if we get to that in this series of rebuilds, like what that's going to be like. And so then Shinji here just comes outright and says, I hate piloting the EVA. If I do it well, no one praises me for doing it. So this part here is interesting. I'm going to kind of come over here and say Shinji on the train and talking about hating the EVA. Yui is like crying in her grave. But Shinji's like, if I do it well, nobody praises me for doing it. Which, yeah. But then he says, if I fail, everyone will hate me, or worse, I could just die. Which is true. I mean, those feelings are very true, right? It makes sense why Shinji would feel that way. And he's like, why am I even here? And then we see the kid version of himself. I thought things would change here and maybe good things would happen. So again, it's kind of a weird thing, because on the one hand, I don't know how to feel about it. Because on the one hand, things are much more streamlined in this translation. It's much more streamlined, Shinji's emotions. Which, if you are someone that struggles to understand the psychological aspect of this show, you'd probably appreciate it. I'm kind of torn because I like it being straightforward for the sake of the movie. But in terms of the series, I do like the show having more ambiguity to where you can make multiple deductions. Like here, you can just break down what Shinji means, and it's pretty straightforward. I do like the ambiguity of the show and kind of like it leaving you to guess things for yourself, right? And so then from there, he's like, this is why I'm able to still stay here. And then he talks about the ceiling. And then we see Rei with the little book, and she gives him the rundown of what's going to happen. And they make Shinji look so good in this. Like, he looks great in this series. I do appreciate, like, the animation on everyone. It's really good. Like, there's a couple shots of Shinji here. I'm excited, if anything, to see Kaoru Shinji with this animation. Let me have this. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm really excited to see it, honestly. And he's like, I don't feel like eating anything. And then Rei's like, fine, bye. And goes up there, and she's like, I'm not afraid of the Eva. And so, yeah, we get everything set up. It's great. But then, okay. Can we talk about this scene on the bridge? Because if there's anything I don't like about this movie, it is this part right here. Because I was like, no. And it's not like I hate it. It doesn't make me hate the movie. No, again, I enjoy the film for what it's giving us, especially the new stuff. But this new stuff, I was like, wait, what? So on the bridge, Shinji has not met up with Rei and Nerve. So that, I feel like it makes Shinji look a little worse than he actually is, because a big part of episode 6 is that Shinji, even though he still hates himself, even though he still doesn't like the idea of being the pilot of the Eva, and they make that abundantly clear in the train scene here, that Shinji's still conflicted. Even though that's the case, Shinji still knows his relationships with Rei and Ida and Toji, and those spur him forwards to make the decision to go and help save Tokyo 3 and fight the Angel. Shinji makes that decision initially in episode 6 because he backtracks to those relationships. And in the anime, we've had episodes 3, 4, and 5 to kind of build up and tie to those relationships. So it makes Shinji's decision to go and help Rei, even after he said he didn't think he could, it makes you feel kind of happy and proud of Shinji, because you're like, well, even though you don't know exactly what's the right choice, you're making a step forward, right? Here, he doesn't meet up with Rei or the others. He's stagnant on the bridge, like he hasn't made up his mind, and Masato's sent to go find him. And so I could understand somebody being mad at Shinji, like, what are you doing? Like, Rei just told you she'd do it herself. Like, what's going on? And she's like, you were supposed to report a long time ago. And Shinji's like, well, she's like, you chose to stay here, didn't you? And didn't do your job properly. So Masato says, if you chose to stay, then do your job. Now, the problem with this scene is that in the anime, Shinji does choose to stay, and he does his job because he chose to stay. But the problem is this movie does not give us time to connect to Ida or Toji, to connect to Rei. So in the movie's logic, the movie's going, okay, Shinji hasn't had time to really process all of these emotions and relationships. So if he stays, does that really make sense with the story that we've created throughout this movie? Does it really match up with the emotions we've given Shinji at this point? It doesn't, and that's the problem, is that he's still conflicted. And unlike the anime, we've not had time to let Shinji sort all of that out. And then Shinji, he's like, I'm afraid of piloting the Eva, which checks out with the train scene, right? And he says, you and the others have nothing to be afraid of. You are always just giving orders from your base underground. Which is the biggest call out in this series, where Shinji's just like, you guys just order me from a base, an underground bunker. You're not out in the trenches. And I'm like, oh shit. Which the problem with that is that I guess I'll put this here of Shinji calling Nerve out. I kind of like it because I'm like, yeah, no, you're saying what some of the audience has probably been thinking this whole time. But the thing of it is, we've just spent the last 10 minutes. It kind of makes Shinji look like an ass in a way too, because we've spent the last 10 minutes showing Masato like them telling the town about the power outage, them getting the cannon together, them doing all this work. Like, we've spent the last 10 minutes showing that NERV has been doing things to get it ready for Shinji to help save the world. And then Shinji calls them out, and it kind of makes Shinji look like an asshole. And so it's like, oh shit, yeah, okay. But Shinji doesn't know that because he's very narrow-minded, and it makes Shinji feel like he's only thinking of himself, which he kind of is, but the anime doesn't make Shinji seem like an asshole. It makes you feel sympathetic towards Shinji. That's the thing, is that in the anime, you feel sympathy towards Shinji because you get where he's coming from. Here, because everything's so streamlined and we've not had that time with Shinji, you just kind of feel like he's being sort of a jerk. And he says, you all are hypocrites. Which, by the movie's logic, sure. But, again, it makes Shinji kind of look like a jerk because... he doesn't know, he's not taking into account all the stuff they've done so far in the series. So, we have a situation where the movie, our protagonist is at a standstill because the movie hasn't allowed him time to connect to these characters that in the anime are the motivation for him to move forward. Because the movie hasn't allowed him to develop those relationships, it wouldn't seem natural or in character for him to immediately change his tune. So he's still stuck in the mode he's been in up until now. So how does the movie solve this problem that it's created for itself? Well, Misato's like, I know what I'll do. And she's just like, fine, come with me for a second. Come with me for a second. And she grabs his hand, right? And leads him to the North Wing 81th Allegation Central elevator going down. There are a lot of problems with this moment. And I was so floored. I was like, are we doing this? There's a lot of problems with this moment. Is because one, so with the Lilith scene, let's just go through this. One, the fact that Misato knows about the basement. I was kind of disappointed about that because that means that there's not going to be a big reveal with Kaji and Misato. She already knows about it. We haven't even met Kaji yet. She already knows about the basement. So there's not going to be a surprise there. That storyline is kind of nixed that. So we don't have that. Misato knows about the basement. Two, Misato just walks in. Just walks in with Shinji to the basement. Without Ritsuko. I'm going to put that on here too. Without Ritsuko. You know, this basement area that's like triple clearance. You need like nuclear codes to get in. Ritsuko has access to it because she's the main scientist and she's doing Gendo on the side. Makes sense why she would have access, but Misato doesn't. She had to get all this special clearance that Kaji risked his life to get her. And here she just grabs Shinji. She's like, hey, let's go to this room. Let's go over here and let's just go hang out. Like it's nothing. She takes him there like it's nothing, right? Now, the hand-holding scene, there is a storyline through here, and I don't know how to feel about it either, where there is a storyline through here about Misato and Shinji and their relationship and her holding his hand. There is a weird, I almost feel like they're leading up that in one of the later movies we're going to have the kiss between her and Shinji, and the movie is trying to set the seeds of that, like the sexualness of that relationship, because it just seems like the hand-holding business is setting that up for later, that there's always been this like physicalness between Shinji and Misato. Now, granted, Misato, I don't feel like, it's not overtly said or implied in this movie, but they do make it a point to draw out the idea that Ritsuko makes a note. She says in the bar scene that Misato, she's like, are you sure you're not treating Shinji just like one of your lovers, essentially is what she's saying. And Misato's like, no. And that part is a little creepy because Shinji's 14 and Misato's like in her late 20s. That part is a little creepy. But, and the hand-holding thing, I was like, you're in the elevator. There's no one around. You don't have to hold hands. It seems like it's setting up that moment for her and Shinji later on when they're going to kiss for End of Evangelion. It's setting up that moment. My issue with it is that it, and I'm kind of wishy-washy about it, is that the show, again, has time to explain Misato's relationship with her father, to explain her parallels with Shinji, how she connects to Shinji, the reason why she feels like she wants to be a guardian to Shinji, her conflicting elements because she's always just used sexuality on men to get what she wants, and here with Shinji, it's kind of a different story. So the anime does a really good job of exploring all of that, and again, the movie just doesn't have time. So they cut corners and get to this part here, which is, I'm kind of iffy on that part. I'm like, I get why they're doing it, but it's just like, And Shinji just looking at her hand. It's almost like they're setting up Shinji to be disgusted with her having sex with Kaji later on because of her holding his hand there. And I don't know how I feel about that. But she explains the whole thing about the second impact, which granted, to be fair, this doesn't bother me because the stuff she's saying here is all stuff that essentially we find out in the classroom early on in the episodes. So that part makes sense. And Shinji's just like, well, you're trying to like, he's like, I've heard this story countless of times already. And she's like, fine. I don't like the fact that Ritsuko's not there. She's like, if an angel ever reaches level EEE, 3 E's, clever movie, of nerve headquarters, then an automatic self-destruct would commence. Okay. We will sacrifice ourselves to prevent the third impact. So she says here that it's not so much an angel. So that's a weird thing too, is that she says that if an angel reaches Lilith, then there's an automatic self-destruct. I don't know how I feel about that because in the episode with Kaoru, it's Misato and Hyuga kind of talking it out and deciding whether or not they were going to do the self-destruct. And here it seems like it's an automatic thing that will happen. So I don't know how that's going to work. But yeah, I do like the animation of like all the like the nodes and the blood and vessels and everything. I do like that. The animation is really good as they like come down into this area. It's really cool. And then they go like through this tunnel and everything into Central Dogma, the gate finally being unlocked. But yeah, the fact that she had access to it, just randomly, she just goes down here to have a picnic. Again, I do like the door, and it seems like the spirals and stuff almost seem like little lances of Longinus coming out to like keep the door shut. I do like the symbolism with that. That part's really cool. I like it. It's just the fact that Misato takes Shinji to see Lilith like within the first 6 episodes. And he's like, and then we see Lilith. And there's all these like, there's the lance there, but there's like different scars across it, like a different scar on Lilith. Like, what? He says it can't be an Eva, which was Misato's line. And they say, no, it's the bringer of life, the agent of its extinction. And it's the second angel, Lilith. So we established that Lilith is the second angel. Now, granted, I really like the little things of the legs sticking out. That part's really cool. You see LCL fluid. But then you have, like, all these little nodes, like these bolts there. Like, what? Like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, like, nails pinning, like, it as well as the lance of Longinus. But the mask is lame. I don't like Lilith's mask. Why is it not the symbol of Seal? What's going on? And it has like the weird eyes. We'll fight with the Evas to protect Lilith. That part is crazy too. Like we were protecting Lilith by fighting. So the Evas are we're protecting Lilith using them from the angels. Now, granted, that is what Misato finds out, right, from Kaji, that they're trying to fight the angels so they can't get to Lilith, or at least that's what they think. They don't realize that this is all, like, prophesized by Seal, and that the idea is that so many angels have to be defeated before the final one can come to, like, encounter Lilith, and then that's when Shinji's gonna kill him. So it's like, it makes sense. Misato's just telling Shinji what she normally would have found out, like, in the 18th episode of the series, but she's like, that's something only you can do. We're entrusting the future of humanity to you and the Eva. And Shinji's like, well, why would you give me that painful responsibility? And she says, oh, no reason. Fate chose you, that's all. And I'm just like, Shinji's face. He's like, we just got done talking about you being a hypocrite. And so again, she says, oh, well, this is all fate. You were chosen to do this because of fate. And Shinji's like, but she told him like 20 minutes ago that he had the freedom to leave if he wanted to. And now she's like, well, actually you don't. It's kind of fate that you're here fighting for humanity and you have to be in this EVA. It's kind of just like fate and destiny. But you have the freedom to leave if you want to. I'm like, that's why I don't like that scene, because the whole idea, it's never really talked about. Destiny and fate are very much left out of Neon Genesis Evangelion. They are implied heavily. There's lots of implications, but no one ever comes out and tells Shinji, except for the OP when Yui is like, go become a legend, young boy. Other than the OP, no one ever comes out and tells Shinji, well, it's preordained, it's destiny, you don't have a choice, you don't have a say in it. No one ever says that, because the whole point of Neon Genesis is that, yeah, Shinji does have a choice, but it's complicated. Choices are not simple, and they have trajectory, and they have all these different layers to them and threads. It's not so simple as just doing or not doing. There's all of these consequences to your actions, and the series explores that in great detail. Here, it's a chosen one narrative. Shinji, you were chosen. It's fake. Fuyu-chan, it's totally... Fuyu-chan's like, it's all destiny. These kids they don't have a choice. Everything's been predetermined for them. And I'm like, really? I'm kind of with Shinji on his face on that, where he's just like, okay, but you're not the only one putting your life on the line there. So then she connects to, I'm like, she could have just told him that. She didn't take him to the basement. She could have just told him that he's not the only one. And so at that point, Shinji is like conflicted. And he says, I'll pilot it one more time. I'll do it one more time. And then he like grips her hand in that moment, which again, it's so weird. Like it's weird that he has like the grip moment, except in this he has a hand to actually hold. It's odd. I don't know how I feel about it. But yeah, Shinji's like, I'll do it one more time. We all know how that song and dance goes. No. Meanwhile, Ramiel's having a rave, having a great old time, raving it. It's a good honor. Good honor. And so then we cut to basically, so that whole basement scene was kind of superfluous. I'm like, why did we have to have that? I guess to have a big, it's very tropey that we have like a big moment that is the turn that spurs the character into doing something in the third act. And this kind of builds up to Shinji's resolve. Okay. It's just kind of weird. But yeah, they established the EVA unit. Then we have them changing. And I did want to make note about this. I did want to make note about this part here, where Rei is saying that you're not going to die because I'm going to protect you. Again, I like the contrast of Shinji has his clothes nice and neatly folded, and Rei's are like all strewn out on the ground. But Rei has the concept where she's like, you're not going to die because I'm going to protect you. And he's like, we might die this time. And she's like, no, that's not going to happen. She's like, no, you won't die. I'll protect you. And then she leaves, and Shinji says, what he tells her, he says, I'm not worth protecting. So I want to make a quick note, obligatory Attack on Titan spoiler. I know this came out in 2008, which is before Attack on Titan was published. I don't know exactly when Attack on Titan started, but this came out in 2008. I feel like that is such a direct statement implying for both Mikasa and Eren, because Mikasa, I've just read the first volume of the manga. And it was published in 2010. And that first volume, Mikasa's like, I'll protect you. You won't die because I'll protect you. And Eren doesn't say anything in reply, but later in season 4 of the anime, it's implied that Eren doesn't believe that he's worth love or worth anyone caring about him, that he's a monster and he has so much self-hatred for himself. And I feel like that ties back to Shinji saying, I'm not worth protecting. Like that self-hatred, we get that there. So into that spoiler, I just wanted to make note of that as soon as that part aired, I was like, oh, okay. And so then we have the thing where we have to do like the message from Toji and Ida. And again, I didn't like this because it was a kind of a cop-out. They just didn't have time in the movie to show Toji and Ida actually having a conversation with Shinji, so they made it into like a voicemail that he reads before going off. And at this point, it's like, it feels kind of, again, it feels unneeded because he just did the basement scene where he got the resolve, and now you're adding on to that, I guess to make sure he doesn't back out, because there's, it's like adding the original resolve to a fabricated scene. Like, they just did it so they could show off Lilith and everybody be like, oh my god, it's Lilith, and like have that moment. But then when you have this later moment where he connects with Toji and Ida, you just needed that, honestly, if you were going that route. Here, you've created this chosen one narrative and made it obvious, and I just don't like that scene. I was so looking forward to waiting and seeing Kaji like show Masato Lilith, and then now. And so then we have Shinji and Rei in the moon scene where she says sayonara. I do like the way that it's animated though, and she explains to him like why she's a pilot, and Shinji seems again surprised. He's like, what do you mean you don't have anything else? And then we get that shot of her in the moon, which again, it's very pretty. I do like the anime maybe a little bit more. But yeah. Oh, Ramiel, I do like the animation of this final battle. I do like the animation of it. It's pretty awesome. So we'll put that battle animation. The animation of that scene. It's the climax of the movie. So of course, it's gotta look good, right? And so he's like, and then we have Shinji like saying what he's doing here, right? We go to him adjusting the scope and everything, getting ready to fire at Ramiel. And she's like having the time of her life over here, like just spouting off beams left and right. I love the shape that she has, right? And so they show everything going, all the power influxes. And him like, I do like Shinji's like breathing heavy. He's nervous. Like, because if you looked through the scope and saw this pyramid, like in all these shapes and stuff, like going crazy. He's like, I'm not prepared for this like Ayanami is. I like that where he's like, I'm not prepared like she is. I'm not like her. Right? And he says, I don't have the confidence to handle the Eva. And I'm going to take a picture of that. I kind of love it. It's like, I don't have the confidence to do it. I just do what I'm told without any reason. Again, that's simplifying. I mean, it's making it pretty obvious what Shinji's thinking. Again, and I'll say it night and day, the anime is much more ambiguous, but it's fine. And he's like, protect humanity. I didn't even realize I was doing such a vital thing. Why does it have to be me? And then I do like that we get a little preview of him going back to that sketch version of himself. I do like that. And I do like that Shinji's questioning. I do like Shinji. He questions his purpose and why he was chosen to do this. And I like the sketch quality of that. Like, it's breaking him down. I do like that. It gives me hope that we're going to see some kind of stylistic stuff like that in the future movies. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Ramiel, I love when she gets blasted. She like becomes this like perturbed, like angry thing of crystals. That part's fun. I like that. But then yeah, they don't destroy her. It's not enough. But then there's this scene here. Okay. So there's this scene here where they're like, we think we can get the cannon to still work, right? They're like, it's already recharging. We think that the cannon might be able to fire, but it's cooling. It's still operational. We just don't know how many shots we have left. And Masato's like, well, let's just try. We'll just do it. We don't have a choice. And so she asks if Shinji's okay. And she's like hurrying it back in firing position. But Shinji's like been knocked down. And he's like, struggling. And I love that everything's like muted and like grays and purples, right? And I like that poor Shinji. He's just like, he looks so beautifully animated even though he's in pain. And everybody's just like, oh, and he's just crying. And everybody's like, oh, well, damn it. And then Gendo. This part here where Gendo's like, he's relieved of duty. Gendo instantly gave up on him. Like, gave up on him instantly. And was like, well, entrust the task to Rei. And I like that Fuyu-chan's like, and they can see Shinji struggling inside the cockpit, but Fuyu's like, do you really want to give that to Rei? Like, should we? And then Gendo says he's of no use. We have no choice but to cut him off. Like, Gendo, instant abandonment. Gendo is like, no. Gendo is instant abandonment. Even when Fuyu-chan's like, are you sure we shouldn't wait? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing at this? And then Masato, she tells Gendo off. She's like, he didn't run from piloting the Eva. She's like, I just showed him some top secret shit. If he runs now, what does that say about me? And then I love that as she's saying this, she's like, he chose not to step down of his own volition. We should entrust this to him. Like, she's like begging Gendo to hold on as Shinji's like reaching for it, right? So she tells Gendo off. And it's just kind of ridiculous. Like, he could have had her killed. Seal could have had her killed. And he's like, no. And then Shinji grabs it and saying, Shinji, we're counting on you. Ikari, do your best. And then, I mean, it's great that Shinji gets up to do it again. It's great because he does that and he like crawls back to the gun. And I mean, it's a great image, but it's just so bizarre. At this point in the movie, I'm like, what? Gendo getting told off by Masato. She's like, have some faith in your own son. I'm neutral about that. But Masato tells Gendo to have faith in his son. Oh my god. It's hilarious because he doesn't. And it doesn't really change anything. He just humors her. It's just kind of like, it reads as a moment that we needed in a movie like this. We had to build up this dramatic, climactic moment. But it just doesn't quite seem Neon Genesis. It feels a little too on the nose shonen for Neon Genesis. And that's kind of why I'm like, iffy to don't like it. But I find it hilarious. It's great. Let's do it. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'll leave it to you. Gendo bowed to Masato. He bowed out to Masato. Make note. Retell this story the way that y'all see fit. But yeah. And then Shinji goes to like fire it, but Ramiel. And then I do love the animation again. The animation on Hyuga and the bunker in them and the red lighting. The animation of Rei like stopping the blast of Shinji firing. It's freaking beautiful. I love it. Poor Ramiel. Like just all the blood coming out of her crystal and like landing on the geofront. It's so gross, but it's so beautiful at the same time. Sure. Oh my god. But yeah. And so then we have, again, Shinji. I'm going to be honest. I don't think we got this in the original anime. I think that she was just like blown up and he jumped out of the Eva and went to it. Here, I will say, I like Shinji breaking into the Eva. I feel like there's something symbolic with it of him like taking the knife and like cutting her open to get her out. I feel like there's something there. And I like that scene. I actually like her like cutting the Eva open to get to her. And then, like, getting in there. I do like that scene a lot. And then him coming to her. Again, the anime makes this moment where he tells her, don't say you have nothing left. Like, you're not alone. Ties to the title of the movie. But I feel like the anime builds up to it a bit better. Like, it has more of a punch, right? But if you wanted to see this moment gorgeously animated, then sure. What I do like, or I'm kind of wishy-washy with it. I say I like it, but it's in terms of the overall story. She doesn't see Gendo here. She does not see Gendo. We, the audience, know the parallels, but she doesn't see Gendo when she looks at Shinji, or we aren't made aware of that. And I like it, but I'm about it. I think in terms of the story, we needed that moment, but any chance to not see Gendo again, especially with him being as much of a vaudevillain here as he is, that's fine. So. And then Shinji, and she's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do in these situations or how I should act. What kind of expression should I have? And Shinji's like, oh, well, it'd be best if you smiled, I think. And she's like, oh. And then she does. Which is really cute. I like how they made Rei look. She looks really nice there. It's great. It's very sweet. And Shinji gets his smile too. And he's got like the faintest little blush on his face. It's very cute. I like that little animation there. It's nice. I like that. That blush is cute. I'm going to take a photo of that. And then he grabs her hand and reaches for it. And I do like the scene of them grabbing each other's hands because it's going to tie back to End of Evangelion when they shake hands at the end there. I liked that little connection there. And of course it cuts away before we can see it, right? Yeah, I like it. I like that a lot. That part's really good. The shaking hands part's good. So then, but then it's like we look up at the moon, and I thought this was the end. I was like, oh, it's the end. It's the end. But no, I'm going to give it like a big old thumbs up. Kaoru's preface here. Again, if we're going to get Lilith in this episode, I was like in my head thinking as we got to this point, I'm like, man, they already revealed Lilith. They've already tied to things that happened in the final episodes. What? I was like, we don't even get to see Kaoru. And I was literally thinking that in my head. And then I'm like, you actually showed him us. But this part here, going up to the moon, the angel's coming from the moon. The angel's coming from the moon. Yeah. Oh, Kaoru, my sweet bean. But yeah, there's this red line over the moon. And we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We see all these different coffins that have been like opened and everything, right? And we see this one that he comes out of. Again, like, what the fudge? No explanation, but that's fine. And they're like, let me guess, the boy has awakened. Now we enter the general phase of the plan. And it's Seal, right? Of course it's the Seal monolith in front of him. On the frickin' moon. Yes, the Dead Sea Scroll Apocrypha has fulfilled up to the books of law. Okay. And then, yeah, Kaoru just piecing in like, hey, what's up? The promised time draws near. And then I'm just like, oh, hi. And there, so Adam has the seal mask. What? Wait, what? What? Not the third again. You never change, do you? So, he said not the third again. Wait, what? Are we like going back in time? Has this already happened? Are we just like retreading? What, the third again? Yeah, what? But has he already met Shinji in a previous life? What? What are you giving us? Wait, what? And so, yeah, then we have Adam with the mask on and everything. But, okay. Color me intrigued. I'm very intrigued at this development that's happened in this story. So, there's all that. Also, I look forward to meeting you, Shinji Ikari-kun. Okay! I'm here for it. It's fine. I want to get a picture of Kaoru's face close up. That's what I want to get. Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. It's great. And then we get this whole to be continued business. Yeah, so if this entire series is just a reimagining of the story, but retelling it with different things happening and new plot developments and things happening, I'm for it. Like, this whole thing with Kaoru at the end, I was like, I'm on board with that. Like, give me things that are different and tweak the story in different ways. It's just, the stuff with Kaoru at the end of the moon was so bonkers and out there. That felt like Neon Genesis. That felt like Neon Genesis Evangelion, where you don't get explanations. Adam's on the moon. There's Adam on the moon. There's these coffins. Some of them have already been opened. Kaoru's like talking about meeting the third again, like this has already happened once before and it's just a retreading. That stuff I'm all about because it feels Neon Genesis. It feels like it's giving the audience something to think about and question and being like, how's this going to play? It's very surreal and kind of dreamlike. I like that. This whole chosen narrative and very shonen-like trope stuff to just set up a climactic ending part, that stuff, not so much. But, I mean, as you can see here, yeah, there was a lot that I was kind of like had some disdain towards, but there is some really good stuff in here. The Kaoru and Ramiel stuff, all about. I'm very curious because it seems like the next rebuild seems like this one was pretty formulaic with these first 6 episodes, and there were elements of other ones kind of tied in there. The next movie seems like it's gonna go off the rails and away from this actions from what has happened in the anime series, and I'm honestly excited about that. Like, give me new stuff. even if it's bad, we can talk about it. But I'm excited that it's not going to just be a retreading, that this is going to have elements that are different. Especially the next one. It seems like the next one is going to go off the rails from what the anime was like. And I'm like, yes, please do that. I want something different in Neon Genesis because it'll be fun to talk about and compare with the anime and the movie. So I've talked for a good hour and 45 minutes. I didn't think I'd have that much, up until the last 20 minutes of this movie, I was really thinking, I was like, I'm not going to have a lot to talk about. I was like, I'm not going to have a lot to talk about in this movie because it's pretty much following beat for beat. And then lo and behold, no, we got a lot to talk about. So yeah. But yeah, that was really exciting. I enjoyed that. I'm the type of person, like, I'm not afraid to talk about what I didn't like about something, but overall, that was a fun time. And I'm really intrigued by the next one. So, we'll see, right? But I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers for the other 3 rebuilds. I'm going to be watching 2.22, 3.33, which is the updated one, and then Thrice Upon a Time, which is 3.0 plus 1.0. Anno. But I'm going to be watching the other 3 rebuilds, so please don't spoil me about those. But we can talk about this one. What you liked, what you didn't like, what you were expecting, how the animation goes. We can just praise Best Girl Ramiel all day long. We finally get to see our naked Kaoru. And so, End of Evangelion didn't give it to us. So here we go. I guess they did. We had, when they were split in half, it kind of was. But, so, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts down below. I'm curious to see what you all thought, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back. Next week, we're going to be doing the audio drama. Going to be looking at the audio dramas. Going to take a week off because I already had that planned. So we're going to do the audio dramas next week, and then the week after that, we're going to be doing Rebuild 2.22. So I'll see y'all next week with more reactions for Neon Genesis Evangelion.